All right, here's the question. Is climate change in the Bible? What about global warming? What is the Christian to do in response to all of this? Does the Christian have a responsibility at all to the environment? What does God say? That's what we're going to find out today. Welcome to Truth Unbound, and I'm your host, Walter Swaim. Hey everybody, look, I just want to ask you if you would take the moment to like this video. Also, right down below the video, to subscribe to this channel and be a part of what Truth Unbound is doing in defending and relating God's Word to current issues and trends in the society that we live in, and also in theology and in the church. So click like, click on subscribe, and that way you'll be up on the latest when the new videos come out each time. And also, if you would share the videos with others, whether you send it by the link by text or do it on Facebook or wherever. I really am excited that you're a part of this and to get others involved as well. Thank you so much. Now we're going to go back to the video. All right, welcome back everybody to Truth Unbound. Again, I'm your host, Walter Swaim. So is climate change in the Bible? Is climate change, or as it was called not long ago, global warming, in the Bible? Does God say anything about it in His Word? Does it matter to God? Should it matter to us as followers of Christ? Does the environment and the care of the environment and climate change and global warming, all those things, are they supposed to matter to us? Are we supposed to be involved in that at all? You see, our purpose at Truth Unbound is always to defend God's Word and His truth, and as it especially relates to the trends and issues of the day, and also in theology and in the church, as well as in the culture and the society. What does God have to say about it? What He has to say about it matters more than anything else. It's a deal breaker on how we are to understand things, the way reality is really seen. God is the ultimate interpreter of reality. And so His truth tells us what really is there. So it's a deal breaker on how we are to respond. So let's listen to His voice and not that of the world, even with issues like climate change. All right, so let's set some ground rules then. In order to have a discussion about anything or to understand something from another source, there needs to be an agreement as to what the term really means. How is it defined? What does, in this specific discussion for today, what does climate change really mean? And also we're going to find out about global warming and the wordplay that's being used there and the definitions that are used. But going back to what we were saying at the start, you can use the same terms between each other but mean entirely different things when you say them. So you need to have an agreed upon definition, and so we want to go to credible sources. So let's give it the old college try and let's see what some of these sources say. All right, let's look at the screen. In youthmatter.world website, it says a simple definition of climate change is this. Climate change is the global phenomenon of climate transformation characterized by the changes in the usual climate of the planet regarding temperature, precipitation, and wind that are especially caused, and here's the key, are especially caused by human activities. As a result of unbalancing the weather of the Earth, the sustainability of the planet's ecosystems is under threat, as well as the future of humankind and the stability of the global economy. Going to another source, and this is from the National Geographic. Global warming is the long-term warming of the planet's overall temperature. Though this warming trend has been going on for a long time, its pace has significantly increased in the last 100 years due to the burning of fossil fuels. Now, when they say about the last 100 years, why that's noticeable is because, well, we've only been taking temperatures for 100 years of the Earth. One of the things they say is raising this as well is not only human activity, but animal activity. Here at livescience.com, it says methane can come from many natural sources, but humans cause a large portion of methane emissions through mining, the use of natural gas, the mass raising of livestock, and the use of landfills. Now, notice here, and I have it highlighted, cattle constitute the largest single source of methane in the U.S., according to the EPA, with the animals producing nearly 26% of total methane emissions. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, yes, cattle flatulence is going to kill us all. But I move on. This is how things are defined, though, so we're going to work off of that. One last thing that is said here, as we were talking about the temperatures, it says the oldest continuous temperature record is the Central England Temperature Data Series, which began in 1659, and the Hadley Center has some measurements beginning in 1850. But, by their own admittance, and this is from NASA now, but there are too few data before 1880 for scientists to estimate average temperatures for the entire planet. So, there you have it. At least we understand that global warming is a phenomenon that has happened according to their interpretation of data, that the temperatures have risen dramatically in the Earth due to human activity. In other words, we're blowing it again. We're causing it to happen. Now, the interesting thing here, too, going back to the terminology of global warming versus climate change, the interesting thing is that that first term, or the first term that was used for years, was global warming. That's all you heard. But over time, the general public became, maybe they considered that the general public was becoming desensitized to global warming, and it wasn't as motivating. And so you began to see a change in the terminology. This is typical of the post-truth age. So they began to change the term and use climate change instead. After all, who would deny that the weather changes? Okay, so I started to know this subtle change in that you're starting to see in the media and everywhere else, social media as well, and on the news, and in science documentaries and textbooks and articles and blogs, that they were using the term climate change instead of global warming, but using the definition of global warming in climate change terminology. I noticed this and picked up on it in my research for my book called To Be Clear, Proclaiming the Gospel in a Post-Truth World. And in finding this, let me run over to it real quick here. In my book, here's what I picked up on in just one source here. Aaron Hall of global brand strategy firm Siegel and Gale wrote about the language necessary recently for Ad Age. And I quote, "Is there a better way to convey the urgency of the situation while also encouraging folks to take action? Could the tools of branding and brand naming create a more resonant, powerful name?" In the same article, end quote. In the same article, he and his team proposed terms to use such as scorched earth and climate collapse, climate chaos, among other proposed terms to arrest public attention and create a sense of urgency or panic. Hall concludes by saying, and I quote, "Whatever we call it, impending climate doom is upon us if we don't act quickly. Global leaders have been sluggish and by and large, individuals have failed to see the need for immediate action. But maybe branding can help. Perhaps a new name will shift the needle, even if just a little." And so they are changing the terminology to get people to believe a certain narrative, and it's deceitful. If the end justifies the means is the technique or the tool that they're using to get people to believe in something, then probably what they're trying to get them to believe in is also not true. And they're even trying to make policy by it, and it's policy being made based on things that may not necessarily be absolutely true based on the full data and evidence. So we should see red flags in that and run from it. So where has this happened before? Well, let me show you. I can remember this in the 70s. and seeing and hearing about it on the news and hearing people talk about it. And that is the Ice Age. This is a cover from Time magazine, which at that time was the premier news magazine. And on their magazine cover here, it's talking about the big freeze and about the Ice Age, that it's not the Earth isn't warming, but it is getting colder and another Ice Age is coming and we're all going to die, okay? Another one is here. This is Maclean's, which is a Canadian news magazine. And at Maclean's talking about acid rain, and this was worldwide as well. In other words, the residue that comes from the factories and emissions in the world is being absorbed in the condensation formed in clouds and then drops with acidic rain, ruining forests and the ground and the earth. And it's going to kill us all as well. And this was, as you can see here, this was in 1980. Another one that is well known, and I can recall, and that is the ozone hole. They're saying that there's this ozone hole in the atmosphere, of course, that we can't see. You can only see it through infrared imaging and those kind of things. And the whole idea is this: is that the chlorofluorocarbons from the spray cans of your deodorant and paint cans of that time would go into the atmosphere, open the hole wider and wider, and the radiation from the sun will increase, and the ultraviolet rays that are dangerous to us, they'll come down on us harder, and we'll all burn to a crisp, basically, okay? So those are some of the things that have happened over the years. And there's others as well, but we won't be able to take the time to do that now. It's repeated itself over and over and over again, and creating this idea and this narrative that we all should be changing to. And eventually it's found out that it is not quite true, or not exactly the picture that they've been painting. There's also a Marxist political agenda that has propelled especially the global warming idea since the 80s, rooted in the 70s as well. And I don't have time to go into all that here, but again, this resource here is probably the best one that has been written on this idea, called Green Tyranny: Exposing the Totalitarian Roots of the Climate Industrial Complex by Rupert Darwall. He is showing here how it has its European Marxist roots, and one of the goals, of course, is to bring down the United States and its economy as well as the European economy. So anyway, that's what that is about. So we see that shift and that change and this creation of these ideas, and these are red flags to us because we depend on truth. Not the truth that we want there to be, but the truth that there is. And so to ask the question once again, is climate change, modern defined climate change and global warming, is it in the scriptures? No, it is not. It isn't. And that's what we're trying to show with the truth of God's word. But these are the things that happen when they take enough of the truth that are legitimate areas of concern in our world. There are problems with pollution and environmental damage. But they take enough of the truth of the real things that are happening in different parts of the world and our community even, and then they mix that with political ideology, driving it and motivating it instead of truth and database understanding and facts, and they make it even into a religion of its own, and it turns it into a lie. We as believers need to be wise to this. And so the world is bringing something entirely different to our doorstep, and worshiping the creature more than the creator, and making it our entire focus. And the believer knows that by God's truth is that our main focus is to reveal God to the world. In other words, to share the gospel. It's not global warming. We are to care for the environment. That's a biblical mandate. So that command is already there and has been since the beginning of time when he created everything. That's not changed. We have a responsibility to do that. And that's enough because of God's command and for his glory and for our benefit. But there are red flags that go up when we hear things like this. Listen up.
And we're like, the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. And your biggest issue is, how are we going to pay for it? And like, this is the war. This is our World War II.
This is the existential crisis of our time. It's, that movie, The Day After Tomorrow? It's today.
And the fires, and the floods, and the droughts, and the man-made natural disasters will only get worse if this planet warms another degree Celsius, and this is our moment, with little more than 10 years to spare.
When I think about this issue, it really is through the lens of my baby nieces who are 1.5 and 3 years old. When I look at what is going to be the world if we do nothing when they turn 20, I'm really scared.
And that's when the red flags go up. It's a narrative that we're supposed to accept, but what they're telling us is not entirely true. And of course, who could ever forget this classic moment?
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams, my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?
And then, of course, there's the speech that was given, and I apologize already for the quality of this. It's the only one I could find quickly here to be used, and all these links will be on our video description below. But maybe some of you will remember this moment.
This was the moment when the rise of the oceans began to slow and our planet began to heal.
So, man has the power to control the weather, and people are cheering this on by the millions at that time. This is godless thinking. This is typical. It's prideful. It's rebellious, and that man can and will solve all our problems. It's man-centered, even controlling the oceans and the weather. Those are things we cannot control. That we would have God powers to control what we really can't is a shaking of a fist in front of the face of God, and it is a usurping of what is only God's at that point. This is what God calls pride, and he despises it, just to name it for what it is. We cannot think that God, who created and fine-tuned this entire incredible universe, got down to the last, even down to the last molecule, that when the 21st and 20th and the 21st centuries rolled around, he went, oh my word, exhaust coming from cars, or factories spewing smoke into the air, cows putting methane into the air as well in the atmosphere. Who knew? What am I going to do? God isn't like that, and that's not what happens. And it's not what happened with God in the first place. He knows everything. He is in control of everything. He is the only one that has that power. And we need to be discerning. We need to be discerning as to what is true and what is not, even in issues like this. Because if they take our entire focus off the main things God wants us to be focused on, then it's a problem. And so God is the ultimate truth detector, the ultimate lie detector as well. And it's easy for us really to do many times from his word and what he says clearly. So what does God indeed say truthfully about what we are supposed to do with the climate and the environment. All right, so what does God say in his word? I am reading here from Genesis chapter 1. I'm using the New King James Version. And this is what he says in Genesis chapter 1, beginning in verse 26. He said, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion,'" remember that word, "dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it." Remember that term. Subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. So that's what God says directly. And what does that tell us directly? That God created man and woman. He created us and placed us here on the earth to multiply, to fill the earth, but to have dominion over it. In other words, have authority over it, to subdue it. In other words, to bring it under control and to develop it and to care for it. In other words, God gave human beings the privilege and responsibility to take care of the earth, which is his, and to do so for his glory, and it returns to our benefit when we take care of things the way we should, whether they're animals or whether it's the earth itself. We are supposed to subdue it, use its resources. That's why God created us all, was to be able to meet the needs that we have, and to learn and to grow and to discover more and to give him glory in doing so. We are not supposed to abuse it. We are not supposed to ruin it. We are not supposed to destroy it, but to care for it while benefiting from it at the same time. To abuse the environment, to destroy it, to ruin it, therefore, is to violate God's command. It is to commit a sin. And that is enough for us to understand that we should be caring for it and putting things in place that will take good care of it from a biblical perspective for the believer. Now, there's something additional in Romans chapter 8. God tells us as well that the creation itself groans. You mean, what does that mean? Well, in Romans chapter 8, he says, "For we know that the whole creation groans and labors with birth pangs together until now. Not only that, but we also who have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, eagerly awaiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body, for we were saved in this hope." What he's describing here is that man's sin not only cut off the connection, separated us from God, and made us, as it says in another chapter in Romans, short of the glory of God. It also means that it affected all of creation itself. Why there are natural disasters and all of these things and calamities with the weather and the climate is because of man's sin. It all comes back to that rebellion of man against God. And so all of creation, as well as we ourselves, are yearning for the day that God returns, the Lord returns, and sets everything back in order just as it was on that last day of creation, just as he put it together. He's going to renew, he's going to remake Eden, he's going to remake this world. In fact, Peter says that God's going to use fire to burn up all of this now and create a new heaven and a new earth where his new kingdom will be forever and ever. And we who believe in him will be in it forever and ever. So God has control of everything, and he knows what he is doing. In the meanwhile, we need to take care of what God gives us, including creation, including the environment. So what do? Number one, trust God that he knows what he's doing. Trust him, not to panic, but to eagerly look for his coming and leave the rest to him. Whatever we cannot control is under his control. And even what we think we control is still under his ultimate control. Number two, let's don't buy into the secular and leftist agendas within environmentalism, especially as we're talking about here, which seeks to destroy the free economies of the world and the democracies. to gain control of people's freedom and lives. And let's stand on the truth of God, understand and know what God's truth is, and to be responsible with it. And number 3, let's be a responsible steward, a manager, administrator of all of God's creation, whether it's the earth or the animals. I can remember as a kid growing up in the 1970s, and there was a canal near our house. And when I looked over the bridge, whenever I would cross it or see it, all it was filled with trash and just covered in algae, which isn't good for the canals like that, and dead fish everywhere. And I remember trying to fish in that and not knowing better. And my parents would say, no, that's, you don't eat that fish. And it was just sad. But then somewhere along the way, someone and many others with them got the idea that, hey, we just can't live like this. And thank God they did, because it cleaned up and it became way better much later and continues that way to this day. So God calls us to be caretakers of his earth that he's entrusted to us, and we need to be doing that. I hope this has helped you to see the real truth. Is climate change and global warming in the Bible? Well, the changing of the climate and of weather, yes, that's all over the Bible. But global warming like it's presented today, and the panic and the fact that man's going to control it and man's going to be the solution to it all, no, it's not in the Bible. But what is in the Bible is that we are to glorify him, and part of glorifying him with all our life, in all our life and in every area of our life, is taking care of the earth that he gives us. So just remember this: when you follow Jesus, you'll follow the truth. We'll see you soon.